There is a pattern that Sigmund Freud observed throughout his work that reveals something fundamental and disturbing about human desire. A pattern so common, so deeply wired into the human psyche that it seems almost universal. The pattern is this: people fall in love with those who hurt them. Not occasionally, not by accident, but repeatedly, compulsively, as if drawn by an invisible force they cannot understand or control. They choose partners who are unavailable, critical, neglectful, or abusive. They stay in relationships that cause them pain. They return to people who have rejected them. They pine for those who cannot love them back. And they do all of this while calling it love. But Freud understood something that most people never grasp. This is not love. This is something else entirely. This is desire in its most primitive, most unconscious form. This is the psyche trying to resolve an old wound by recreating it. This is the endless repetition of a pattern established so early in life that you don't even remember learning it. And until you stop this pattern, until you stop loving those who hurt you, you will never understand what desire actually is. You will never know what you actually want. You will spend your entire life chasing a fantasy that has nothing to do with genuine connection and everything to do with unfinished psychological business. Let's start with the uncomfortable truth. The people you're most attracted to are not random. Your attractions are not mysterious or inexplicable or simply a matter of chemistry. Your attractions are revealing something about your psychology. They're showing you what's unresolved. They're pointing to what's unhealed. And most commonly, they're recreating the emotional dynamics you experienced early in life with the people who were supposed to love you, but who hurt you instead. Think about it. If you had a parent who was emotionally distant, you likely find yourself attracted to partners who are emotionally unavailable. If you had a parent who was critical and demanding, you likely find yourself attracted to partners who are impossible to please. If you had a parent who was inconsistent, sometimes loving, sometimes rejecting, you likely find yourself attracted to partners whose affection feels uncertain and conditional. The specific details vary, but the pattern is the same. You're attracted to people who make you feel the way you felt in your earliest relationships. Why? Why would the psyche do something so seemingly self-destructive? Why would you be drawn to pain? Freud's answer is both elegant and devastating, because the psyche is trying to master the original wound. It's trying to replay the scenario and get a different outcome. It's saying, this time, I'll be good enough. This time, I'll earn the love. This time, the unavailable person will choose me. This time, the critical person will approve of me. This time, I'll finally prove that I'm worthy of love. But here's what makes this pattern so tragic. You can't win. You can't master the wound by recreating it with a different person. The unavailable partner will remain unavailable. The critical partner will remain critical. The inconsistent partner will remain inconsistent, because these people are not your parents. They're not the original source of the wound. They're just stand-ins, substitutes, players in a drama that was written decades ago. No matter what you do, no matter how hard you try, you cannot use them to heal what was broken in childhood. And yet, you try. You pour yourself into these relationships. You adapt yourself. You work harder. You become more accommodating. You suppress your needs. You accept less than you deserve. You tolerate behavior that hurts you. And you tell yourself that this is love. That love requires sacrifice. That love is supposed to be difficult. That if you just loved them better, harder, more purely, they would finally be able to love you back. But this is not love. This is compulsion. This is repetition. This is your unconscious trying desperately to resolve something that cannot be resolved through romantic relationships. And as long as you're caught in this pattern, as long as you're loving people who hurt you, you have no access to authentic desire. You don't know what you actually want, because all of your wanting is filtered through this unconscious need to master the original wound. Freud understood that authentic desire, desire that emerges from your actual nature rather than from your wounds, can only be accessed when you stop the repetition, when you recognize the pattern, when you see clearly that the people you've been calling love are actually proxies for unresolved pain, when you make the devastating acknowledgement that you've been chasing ghosts, trying to win love from people who represent those who couldn't love you properly in the first place. This recognition is not comfortable. It requires you to look at your entire romantic history and see the pattern. To see that the people you've been most obsessed with, most attracted to, most convinced were your soulmates. These people were not chosen by your authentic self. They were chosen by your wounded self. They were chosen by the part of you that's still a child trying to earn love from a parent who couldn't give it. They were chosen by your unconscious in its misguided attempt to heal through repetition. And once you see this, once you really understand it, you have to grieve. You have to grieve the relationships you thought were love but were actually reenactments. You have to grieve the time you spent trying to win people who were never going to choose you. You have to grieve the love you never received from the people who were supposed to give it to you. You have to grieve the child you were who learned that love meant pain, that connection meant struggle, that being chosen meant being good enough according to impossible standards. This grief is necessary. It's not optional. You cannot bypass it. You cannot skip straight to healthy desire. Because until you grieve, until you fully feel the loss of what you never had and the waste of what you spent your life chasing, you cannot let it go. You cannot stop the pattern. You'll keep returning to the same type of person, telling yourself that this one is different, that this time it will work, that you've learned your lesson, while your unconscious drives you right back into the familiar pain. But if you can stay with the grief, if you can allow yourself to fully feel the devastation of recognizing how much of your life has been organized around trying to win unavailable love, something begins to shift. The compulsion begins to loosen. The attraction to people who hurt you begins to fade. And in the space where that attraction used to be, something new becomes possible. Authentic desire. Authentic desire feels different from compulsive attraction. Compulsive attraction is urgent, obsessive, consuming. It feels like you'll die if you don't have this person. It feels like they're the only one who can make you whole. It feels like your entire existence depends on winning their love. Authentic desire is quieter, it's steadier, it's based on genuine compatibility, genuine resonance, genuine appreciation of who the person actually is rather than what they represent in your psychological drama. When you stop loving those who hurt you, when you break the pattern of compulsive attraction, you start to notice different things in people. You start to notice kindness. You start to notice consistency. You start to notice people who are actually available, actually capable of connection, actually interested in knowing you rather than interested in you serving a function in their own psychological drama. And at first, these people might seem boring. They might not trigger the same intensity of feeling. They might not create the same sense of urgency or obsession. This is because your nervous system has been wired to associate love with struggle, with uncertainty, with the desperate attempt to win approval. When someone is actually available, actually kind, actually capable of loving you, your system doesn't recognize it as love. It feels too easy. It feels too stable. It feels like something must be wrong because love is supposed to hurt. Love is supposed to be work. Love is supposed to require you to prove yourself. Freud would tell you, this is exactly the moment where you have to resist your conditioning. This is exactly the moment where you have to choose differently. You have to be willing to explore connection with people who don't trigger your compulsive patterns. You have to be willing to tolerate the discomfort of stability. You have to be willing to learn a new language of desire, one based on genuine compatibility rather than psychological reenactment. And as you do this, as you gradually retrain your nervous system to recognize healthy connection, you begin to understand desire in a completely different way. You begin to understand that what you thought was desire, that intense, obsessive attraction to people who hurt you, was actually a defense mechanism. It was a way of staying fixated on the familiar pain so you never had to risk genuine intimacy. Because genuine intimacy is actually more terrifying than compulsive attraction. Genuine intimacy means being seen by someone who is capable of seeing you. It means being vulnerable with someone who might actually care about your vulnerability. It means allowing yourself to be loved by someone who is capable of loving you. And all of this is terrifying because it means you might finally get what you think you've been wanting all along. And if you get it and it's not enough, if you finally receive genuine love and you still feel empty or anxious or incomplete, then you have to face a more fundamental truth, that no amount of external love can heal the original wound, that the work is internal, that you have to learn to give yourself what you never received. This is the deepest insight in Freud's work on desire. that much of what we call romantic love is actually an attempt to outsource the internal work of self-acceptance and self-love. We're trying to get from another person what we need to develop within ourselves. We're trying to use romantic relationships to heal wounds that can only be healed through internal psychological work. And as long as we're doing this, as long as we're loving people who hurt us in an unconscious attempt to master childhood wounds, we cannot access authentic desire or authentic connection. When you stop loving those who hurt you, when you stop the compulsive pattern, you're forced to face yourself. You're forced to do the internal work. You're forced to develop the capacity to see your own worth, to validate your own experience, to provide for yourself some of what you never received. And only from that place, only when you've done some of that internal work, can you enter relationships from a place of genuine desire rather than desperate need. Authentic desire, desire that's not driven by unresolved wounds, is based on appreciation rather than need. It's based on genuine interest in another person's actual qualities rather than what they represent in your psychological drama. It's based on the desire to share your life with someone rather than the need to use someone to complete yourself. It's based on choosing rather than being driven. And relationships based on authentic desire look completely different from relationships based on compulsive attraction. They're more stable, but also more genuinely intimate. They're less dramatic, but also more satisfying. They're less urgent, but also more enduring. They're characterized by mutual care rather than one person desperately trying to win love from someone who's incapable of giving it. They're characterized by growth rather than repetition. They're characterized by genuine seeing and being seen rather than performing and projection. But here's what Freud would also tell you. Most people never get here. Most people spend their entire lives in compulsive attraction. They keep choosing people who hurt them. They keep repeating the same patterns. They keep calling it love when it's actually something else. They die without ever understanding what they actually desired, without ever accessing their authentic wanting, without ever experiencing genuine intimacy. Why? Because breaking the pattern is hard. It requires you to give up the fantasy that you can finally win the love you never received. It requires you to grieve the relationships you thought were meaningful, but were actually compulsive reenactments. It requires you to tolerate the discomfort of healthy connection when your system is wired for struggle. It requires you to do internal work instead of seeking external solutions. It requires you to face yourself rather than lose yourself in the drama of dysfunctional relationships. Most people are not willing to pay this price. They'd rather keep chasing unavailable love. They'd rather keep trying to win people who can't choose them. They'd rather stay in the familiar pain than risk the unknown territory of genuine connection. They'd rather remain blind to their patterns than see the devastating truth about how much of their life has been organized around unresolved wounds. But the cost of this choice is enormous. The cost is your authentic life. The cost is genuine intimacy. The cost is knowing what you actually desire. The cost is accessing your real self rather than your wounded self. The cost is the possibility of being genuinely loved rather than conditionally accepted. The cost is everything that makes life worth living. Freud spent his career trying to help people see this, trying to help them recognize the patterns, trying to help them understand that the people they were most attracted to were not soulmates but psychological stand-ins, trying to help them stop the compulsive repetition so they could access authentic desire, trying to help them do the internal work so they could have genuine relationships, trying to help them understand that when you stop loving those who hurt you, you finally gain the capacity to understand what you actually want. The question is whether you're willing to do this work, whether you're willing to look at your attraction patterns and see the wounds beneath them, whether you're willing to grieve the love you never received and the time you wasted chasing proxies, whether you're willing to tolerate healthy connection even when it doesn't trigger your familiar patterns, whether you're willing to do internal work instead of seeking external salvation, whether you're willing to discover what you actually desire beneath the compulsive need to master old wounds. Because until you do this work, until you stop loving those who hurt you, you will never know what you actually want. You will never know who you actually are. You will never experience genuine desire or genuine intimacy. You will spend your entire life in patterns that were established before you had language, driven by wounds you don't remember receiving, chasing people who can never give you what you need, calling it love when it's actually compulsion. But you can choose differently. You can see the pattern, you can stop the repetition, you can grieve what you lost, you can do the internal work, you can learn to recognize healthy connection. You can discover what you actually desire. You can experience what it's like to be with someone who doesn't hurt you, who can actually see you, who chooses you not because you've finally proven yourself worthy, but because they genuinely want to be with you. This is what becomes possible when you stop loving those who hurt you. Not a fairy tale, not perfection, not the absence of all difficulty, but genuine connection, authentic desire. The experience of being with someone as yourself rather than as a wounded child trying to earn love. The freedom to want what you actually want rather than what your wounds tell you to want. The possibility of a relationship based on mutual care rather than psychological reenactment. Freud knew this was possible. He knew because he saw it happen. He saw people break the patterns. He saw people grieve the wounds. He saw people access authentic desire. He saw people create genuine relationships. But he also knew it was rare. He knew most people would choose the familiar pain over the unknown possibility. He knew most people would keep loving those who hurt them, keep repeating the patterns, keep calling it love when it was actually something else entirely. The question is, which will you choose? Will you keep loving those who hurt you? Keep chasing the fantasy that you can finally master the wound? Keep organizing your life around compulsive patterns you don't understand? Or will you do the harder work of stopping, grieving, healing, and discovering what you actually desire beneath the wounds? The choice is yours. But only one of these paths leads to genuine understanding of desire. Only one leads to authentic intimacy. Only one leads to actually living rather than endlessly repeating. Only one leads to freedom. When you stop loving those who hurt you, you finally understand desire. Not immediately, not easily, but eventually, authentically, genuinely. And that understanding, that access to your true wanting, that capacity for genuine connection, that's worth every painful step of the journey.